last week, tariffs were adjusted. It was an increase, and many of you will be paying more for water and for electricity. Tonight, we're going to have a conversation with the man at the top of that chain when it comes to PURC making the decision. The executive secretary is my guest. I know many of you still have questions. I'll try to put those questions to him to get you some answers as we approach 1st September, just a few days away that you begin to pay. We'll break it down, make it simple for you to appreciate how much this will affect you. But let's start with the breakdown. You know, the Ghana Water Company initially had asked for 334% increase in the cost of water that you should be paying, right? What they got is 21.55%, which, if you look at the difference, they received simply 6.5% of what they asked for. Many will say, well, if this is what they're asking for, you remember we had this conversation here on PM Express, and they explained why they wanted this, that if you don't give them something close to this, they will possibly even shut down because of the high cost of, refining the water and making it cleaner for you to drink through your taps. And so now that they're getting just 21%, the question then becomes, who is going to make up for the shortfall, that difference there? The Electricity Company of Ghana, and I bet this is the one that many people will feel, because electricity is one of those things that, you can't do without. For water, you can drill your own mechanized borehole, like myself, and then you are off completely from what Ghana Water is supplying. So you will not necessarily feel it. But for electricity, we all rely on it. And 148% is what they asked for. They got 27.15%. 18.3% of what they've actually requested. Same questions apply here. Now, we're going to break this down a bit more, because if you look at water, for example, 5 cubic meters, that's 5,000 liters of water. Currently, the old tariff was 22 cedis, 45 pesos is what you were paying for 5,000 liters. If you have a polytank, for example, use that to measure. Some of these is 2,000 liters, 5,000 liters. You're paying 22 cedis, 45 pesos for it. Now you're going to be paying 27 cedis, 29 pesos for that same amount. So you're paying just slightly above 5 cedis more for 5,000 liters. And then 10 cubic meters, that's 10,000 liters, a very big polytank. You're talking about 62 cedis before. Now you're paying 75 cedis, 39 pesos is what you'll be paying for now. Now, if you look at non-residential, now one of the things that we're told that these adjustment that we're seeing will be very favorable to businesses, right? We're going to ask the question of the PURC boss, how exactly does the real figures deliver that? So a 10 cubic meter, 10,000 liters, if you were a business, non-residential, you were paying 98 cedis, 30 pesos for it if you're a business. Now you'll be paying 119 cedis, 49 pesos. I mean, can you cope with this as a business in the current economic climate? Let's hear from you tonight also. Commercial is 10 cubic meters. For those who use water for sachet water and co, you were paying what, 129 cedis, 80 pesos. Now you're paying 175 there. Now, if you look at electricity, and this is the interesting thing, right? You have Lifeline. If you consume a 0 to 30 kilowatts an hour, you were paying just 12 cedi, 10 pesos. The new tariff, you're going to be paying 14.70. Right, for those in this bracket. But, the minority issued a statement and say majority of us, residential, we are within the 0 to 300 kilowatts an hour bracket. And that's where they say the impact will be felt. So you have 120 kilowatts an hour. So all other residential consumers, 0 to 30, where the bulk is. If you are within 120, then you're talking about 117 more now. 300 kilowatts an hour, you are in 277. So I guess many of us are going to be paying quite significantly more for electricity. If you look at the difference here, I mean, more than 70 cedis more for if you're between that bracket of up to 300 kilometers plus, right? Non-residential, if you're a business, that's the increases that you see there. Now, if you look at the analysis since 2010, what you see is the number of tariff decisions have been 30. That's the PURC have been making. Now, tariff increases have just been 12. Tariff reductions have just been 2. And no change is 16. So the PURC over time, clearly from the trend, prefers to not touch the tariff at all. I mean, and you know all the politics and governmental concerns that come into play because tariff is a big, big deal. But the question we need to ask, though, in the current economic challenges that we find ourselves, can the consumer, business and residential, can they bear this increase, no matter how small it is? I find this very interesting because if you look, it tells a picture of the tariff analysis, the color chart, in terms of increases, decreases, and no change. I wanted to focus on 2017 since this government came into power. From 2017, when they came into power in January, there was a no change, if you remember. And then in April, no change. In July, no change. And so that whole year, there was no change, right? And they come to 2018, yellow, there was a decrease, which many thought at that time, there was a criticism that government was being for the Christmas, right? So there was a decrease rather in 2018 in March, and then no change again. So this government really, if you look at it in terms of its history with adjustments, have chosen either not to change or decrease, which is quite unusual. If you compare to the 2010 to now, you see 2010, there definitely was an increase. You see 2011, there was an increase, there were 2 increases, right? 2013, again, you see an increase there. But then you come to 2017, right? And then you have no change, no change, no change. The next year, there's actually a decrease. If you come to 2019, right, again, then you see an increase, two increases. And then we haven't seen any again till now, which is 2020, where you have what we are recording currently. So this tells you a very interesting story about why now. There's some who say that if the PURC were doing the automatic tariff adjustments, we possibly would not require a 20% plus adjustment currently. We'll ask the PURC boss what he makes of this. And then if you look at the tariff analysis in pesos per kilowatt hour, this is what the graph tells us in terms of people's consumption, which is going up, by the way. Now, the investments that have been made is also an interesting thing that we are interested in. If you look at the PURC's own website, they have some detail there about investment that NETCO had made, ECG, etc. Because they were making an investment, and they're saying that this is part of the reason why they need an increase. Now, the procurement and installation of 25,000 smart type, repayment meters and accessories, I mean, is what NETCO had put in. If you have a Ghana Water Company, select a project, they put a replacement and upgrading of the 0.6 kilometer defective raw water. So they are pumping in, money, 360. And PURC went around and verified this, right? So they have rehabilitation of the Dalum raw water pump at 88,000, 1.5 million spent on installation of 51,000, metrics distribution pipelines. The question is, these investment that is made, can they recoup from the increases that they got? If you look at the ECG, same issues that the PURC had found. So we're going to have this conversation with them. My real concern is to try and draw out the impact on you and the impact on the utilities, by the way, as far as this increase is concerned, considering what they asked for and what they got. The PURC's Executive Secretary, Dr. Ishmaelaka, is my guest after this break. My guest is in the studio. He is Dr. Ishmaelaka. He's Executive Secretary of the Public Utilities Regulatory Commission. Doc, thank you for your time here on PM Express.
You're welcome, Evans.
So you've had this is your first taste of a tariff adjustment since you were appointed.
Yeah.
But unfortunately for you, it comes at a time of unprecedented economic challenges. The ordinary Ghanaian business and ordinary person is already going through, difficult times that most of us have not seen in our lifetimes. I wonder, how did you factor that in arriving at the adjustments and increases that we articulated?
Well, thank you very much, Evans. So, two things. When we started this process, we decided to be very open and transparent. We went around the whole country, we met TUC and others, and you could hear from wherever you go that we're not ready for any increase. Mm-hmm. But we also had engagement with the utilities, and they keep telling you that if you don't do anything, we will collapse. We can't run even next year. Yeah. So we were in between. We don't want to pay any increase because we're facing a lot of challenges, which is true. And because of the same challenges, inflation, exchange rate, and others, the utilities also have we're also going through a lot, because the last adjustment was done in 2019. Exchange rate was $1 to 5 cedis or so, and by 2022, things were different. Inflation was different. It was single digits then, now it's different. Take Ghana Water, then they were using some quantity of chemicals to treat the water. Now, because of galamsey and others, they need to buy about 4 times that. So things have changed, the cost implications and all that. So we need to take all these things into consideration. So yes, the customer end facing a lot of challenges, the utility end challenges, and you need to make a decision. Mm-hmm. So we did a number of things. I think one of them, as I said, was to be transparent. Another thing was also to be very scientific. So very objective in the sense that we'll not just sit at PURC, look at the numbers and say we are not doing anything, or we are just going to give you 5. We made sure we came out with our guidelines, and we went according to those guidelines. Now, when you take the guidelines, you can't disaggregate whatever the utilities are looking for. So we have, let's say, the operational issues, so operational budget, human resource, the maintenance, and others. Then you can also have the capital expenditure. Now, when you disaggregate the capital expenditure, for instance, you have, say, return on equity. Mm-hmm. So what we're looking for was to pass on costs that is prudent to the customer. So we go to the utility and say that when we take your asset, can we still disaggregate the same asset into one? The asset you bought yourself, the asset you got from donors, and the asset which were funded by government. Mm-hmm. So if we take the assets which were funded by government, let's say 40% of your assets, government is the owner of ECG, Ghana Water. So if government paid for those assets, then the return on equity should go to the government.
In fact, indirectly, the taxpayer, me and you, bought it for you.
That is it. So what the government is representing all of us. So at this critical moment, government, do you want return on your asset, or we can use that to reduce the tariff a little bit for the consumer?
So that's an interesting proposition. So if government had made investment into ECG and Ghana Water, you're asking government, do you want to return? Do you want something back from that investment, or you want to forego that?
For now, looking at the circumstances the consumer is facing.
Okay, what did the government tell you?
Now I want to forego, at least my investment. So as I said, we divided the investments into 3. The ones the utilities provided for, you get your returns. Those government provided for, we take it out. So that was one. There was also this case of on-land loans.
But I'm interested in the government bit.
Yeah.
So this is indirectly government subsidizing, true?
Well, I won't call it a subsidy.
Okay. Because if government says, my investment, I want my return on it, you definitely will not, you end up with something more than 21.55% for water, and 22 for
27.4. It could have gone higher, but government can say, I want to zero my returns for this year. Well, I wouldn't see that as as a subsidy, but as more like government zeroing my returns for this year.
What, was it this year alone, or this is in perpetuity, government zeroing of their return?
So this is for the next 3 years. You know,
the next 3 years.
Is for 3 years. Yeah.
So is it the anticipation is that this current tariff increases should hold steady for the next 3 years? Is that what you?
Yeah. So it will hold, but it will be adjusted every quarter through the quarterly adjustment. And during the quarterly adjustment, we consider 3 main factors: the exchange rate, inflation, and some, let's say, fuel-related issues. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, so that's where we are with the government. And then you said there were loans.
Yes. So there were also on-lend loans. Government.
Sorry, I was going to ask you. So how did you quantify the returns, government returns?
Yes. So we quantified the total asset, decided to divide this, and we did this through what we call regulatory audit at PURC. We have a very strong regulatory audit unit. Decided to divide them with the utilities. We didn't sit out and do it. With the utilities, which ones did you pay for? Which one did you get from donors? Which one? And this division has implication for the return on equity and even depreciation on a number of factors. So if, let's say, A is for government, then we can talk to the government. These become policy issues that, looking at what is happening, this is under normal circumstances, you should get this. Do you want it? And if government says, because of all what is happening, zero it, then we take it.
How much is government foregoing in the next 3 years to cushion the consumer?
Well, I may need to check the figures, because this is for Ghana Water, for ECG, for other Greco, for NELCO, yes.
Okay, and then the loans bit you were talking about?
Yes, so government took some loans some time ago, some about 10 years ago, and on-lend these loans to the utilities. So government can take or pay for a project. Now, in 2015, 2016, there was this cabinet decision that the utilities should start paying back those loans. So when you look at Ghana Water's proposal, they had about 600 million cedis in the proposal as payment to government as part of paying back those on-lend loans. So again, we engage government that these are loans you took. You are paying, and government is paying those loans anyway. And this is a policy. And because of that, they added this 600 million to the proposal. If they pay you, this is the implication on the tariff. If you decide to forego, at least for the next 3 years, this will be the implication. Government says, okay, already I'm paying for it, so I want to forego that. Now you see, you've already taken the return on equity out. You take the on-lend loan out. You see that the number for, say, Ghana Water or ECG has already reduced. So these were the exercises, unpacking the proposals and taking item by item, looking at the policy issues with government and those we should deal with when it comes to the utility. Let me also add that doing all these things when it comes to the operations, like maintenance, operations, and human resource, we gave it to them so that the utilities can continue to operate.
So you mean what they asked for human resource purposes and operations purposes, you didn't touch?
We did our audits. And when we did arm's length analysis to see that if you say that you're going to maintenance will cost A, it's a similar utility in Côte d'Ivoire, similar utility in a similar country, the same size, same meters. How much are they going to spend next year on maintenance? We did all those things, and when we were satisfied, we also looked at their own trend analysis, inflation-adjusted trend analysis over the past 10 years. That how much have you been spending on maintenance for you to ask for this for the next 3 years? So after satisfying ourselves, mostly we approved most of the operational budget so that at least they can remain stable. But for the capital budget, that is where we did this aggregation and took some of the things out.
So operations, we know Ghana Water Company, Electricity Company of Ghana would need investment.
Yes.
Heavy investment going forward. Yeah. Did this factor that in?
Yes, so they also submitted more like projects they want to invest in. True, they did. So again, we did 2 things. One of them was that we invited them to justify, we call it the formal hearing process. You justify each investment. one, the cost, how that investment is going to help you meet our benchmarks in terms of reducing losses, in terms of improving reliability, in terms of satisfying the customer, and how that investment is going to help overall in your performance, improve your performance. So we did that. Then we worked with the utilities to scale this down to the critical investment. And let me also add that, initially we were looking at 5 years. This major tariff review should have been for 5 years.
Sorry, when you say for the last 5 years?
For the next,
for the next 5 years.
should have been for the next 5 years.
So in other words, when you did this, you wouldn't have done a major tariff review for the next 5 years?
Yes.
Okay.
So, but we decided to go for 3 years. Mm-hmm. Now, they had a number of investments, let's say 21 projects. Because we are doing 3 years, we work with them to now come to identify the critical ones. So if I'm to give you half of the money you are requesting for, which ones do you think are the critical, most important to your survival, to your growth, to satisfying the customer that you should spend your money on? So they went back, they did risk scaling, they did scale of preference, came back with what they believe is a critical investment.
So this will be investment without which to possibly run into challenges of supplying us electricity and giving us water?
Yes.
Okay. And so that's the only one you approved?
That's the only one we factored in for this tariff, yes.
Okay. But that then becomes, for the next 3 years, they have to operate with this, within this critical investment. So they have enough money, you're saying, for the next 3 years to make investments into these critical areas?
Yes.
Yes. So you were confident, looking at what you've given, and I'll come to the consumer, what you've given to the utilities, that they have enough to continue giving us potable water and supplying us electricity?
We are very confident that what we've given them is enough. As I said, operational budget, you have them. So you can pay your workers, you can do maintenance, you can do operations, we've provided that. Critical investment, we've provided for. Provided some depreciation, we've provided some return on equity, so they can invest. So they have enough to operate.
I mean, because if you say that, but if you look at the disparity between what they asked,
yes,
and what you gave them, that's just a huge gap. Yeah. Even if you factor in the return on equity, you factor in the situation with the loans that government are taking for them, and then there's a third element that you mentioned, which is those they got for donors. From
donors, even there's a fourth one on depreciation.
Okay.
So depreciation they use what you call the gross replacement method. So I have an asset and I say that maybe I'm calculating the depreciation on the value of the asset. What we do is that we look at the asset may have been used. Maybe you acquired the asset in 2015. You might have used it for 7 years. And during that 7 years, we paid you some depreciation. Mm-hmm. So we deduct that, what we've paid already. Then that means consumer has contributed. We do some deduction to have a net value. And we calculate the depreciation on that net. Now, when you do that, you see that there will be some difference between what they brought and what we actually gave them. So a number of analysis scenarios went through. And when you do that, because most of the budgets were when you take ECG, for instance, 34% of their total proposal was from this depreciation. Mm-hmm. So if you're able to even halve the depreciation, it means that you are reducing their proposal by quite a number. Then you can't take the government-funded, the return on equity, you take the on-lend loans, and before you realize you're coming down to quite a smaller figure.
Let's talk about the impact on this on the ordinary person. So we started off by talking about the economic challenges that most Ghanaians are. On September 1, this will kick in. Yeah. Most often than not, when this happens, you start feeling it. For those who buy prepaid meters, it will be immediate. Yeah. Postpaid, you of course have to wait almost a month plus when you get a bill for this to happen. In the economic impact on people, right? We're looking at, so you've now analyzed how you came about giving the utilities. But the economic impact on people, in the conversations that you had with government, the government appreciate, no matter how small this is going to be the most significant impact, considering inflation, depreciation of the cedi, and everything else that is happening in people's lives currently. This is obviously going to add to inflation. But the Ghana Statistics Service has already said, now, but the next time they give us the new inflation number, they expect this to factor in. The periods, of course, I know this is not your forte, but this must have played significantly in your decision you're making.
Yes, when you look at this decision, 3 main factors were considered. In fact, the effect of all these variables, everything, and even this decision on the consumer was the first one. The utility-related factors,
which we've just discussed.
We discussed, was the second one. Then the general macroeconomic conditions, exchange rate, inflation, was the third one.
Which affects the utilities
and affects
the consumer as well.
So we placed all these 3 variables on the table, and we decided to see how we can minimize the impact on the consumer without also negatively affecting the utilities grow to more like serve the consumer. So yes, the utility should be able to serve, but the consumer should not suffer too much. So we did a number of things again. And when you come to the consumer end, apart from all these breaking down, taking some out, reducing, zeroing and all that, was to make sure that the impact of the tariff was not too much on the consumer. Again, we should also remember that the last time we did any adjustment was 2019. So over time, in fact, some of these factors have built up. In fact, people were a little surprised. It has built up to this point. So we needed to make, it was almost inevitable. We needed to make a decision. Another thing we did was to also close some of the banks. So in the past, we have your lifeline. Then when you even come to the other residential, you see maybe 0 to 300, they will have it separate, or maybe we have one across board. And when you do that, we realize that we're getting quite a higher figure, around 79% or so. So we need to go back, look at the model and see how we can. So a number of things, one at the utility end, to ensure that we are cutting down on how much we are passing on. And when you come to the tariff itself, also reorganizing our model to ensure that what we are passing on to the consumer is not too much. So yes, consumer factor.
But 27 for electricity, and 22, is it?
21
for water.
Yeah.
Is significant in this time.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, and many argue that PURC must do the automatic tariff adjustments.
Yeah.
And if you're doing automatic tariff adjustment, for example, the whole of 2021, there was no decision at all.
Yeah.
If you're doing that, you wouldn't have the situation currently where you have to increase electricity by 27%.
Well, that is a very valid point. We didn't do any adjustment in 2021 because PURC did not have a board. Now the tariff is approved by the board. And 2021, the board was appointed in November 2021. And without the board, the secretariat cannot come out with a tariff. I mean, it's against our law. So that was the only reason we couldn't do the quarterly.
Some may argue that if that's the argument, then PURC is punishing the consumer for its inability to do what the law asks us to do in the previous year.
So it wasn't PURC that did not make the decision.
I get it. Your inability. You didn't have a board.
No board.
Yes.
Yes, the board should make that decision.
But that's not the fault of the consumer.
So the consumer is not being punished because of also the absence of the board.
Because the cumulative automatic tariff adjustment would have made this incrementally smaller.
Okay.
Over time.
Unfortunately, we've not, for instance, done an empirical analysis to establish that yet. What we've done is that looking at that absence of the board and the fact that we didn't make a decision the whole of 2021, I think that is why this particular board, in fact, when you look at the work they put in, the engagement, the analysis, and all those things they did, was to ensure that, yes, if we were to leave it, just leave it, or let's do some calculation and pass on. I mean, we've experienced 59% in Ghana before. PURC has passed on more than 70% before. They could have done it. And even in those cases, the utilities did not request this much. So that is why I think the board took their time, unpacked the whole proposals, and ensured that whatever they are passing on is prudent enough and may not have too much impact on the consumer.
The minority in Parliament disagree that it doesn't have an impact. In fact, they actually do analysis to suggest that the real increase is above 30%.
Well, so when you read the statement, I think what we said was that the increase is an average. Now, let's say you have three numbers, 2, 4, 6, and somebody asks you to find an average. You add the three numbers, and you divide by 3, and in this case, you may get 4. So if you get 4, somebody who's paying 2 may say that maybe you are overestimating. Somebody who is paying 6 may think that you are underestimating, but the average is 4. You are not wrong, and that is what PURC did. What we did was that this time around, I think apart from minimizing the impact, and I'm not saying there's no impact on the consumer, there is an impact, but what the board did was to help minimize that impact. It could have been more. That's the first one. The second was that this board, in fact, the policy direction of the board is to look at the non-residential, the commercial, the small and medium-scale enterprises, the organizers, the hairdressers, and those who fall into that bracket. When you look at their percentage change, it doesn't go beyond 5%, though the average is 27.5%. They are paying less than 5%, because the intention is to at least give them that room to expand, to invest. And when you look at AGI, almost every year they come out with a business barometer, and they list the top 3 challenges of all businesses. And one of the, in fact, consistent over the past 10 years has been the high cost of electricity. So I think that is one of the things the board is addressing in line with global practices. I mean, Ghana and I think very few countries where you go, you see residential paying less than businesses. So I think that is a trend. So it is one stage. The next stage, hopefully maybe in the next 3 years, will be to try to remove what we call the cross-subsidy. Then the next stage will be to have one band.
So previously, the situation we had, as you suggest, was that the businesses were paying more than residential.
Paying far more than, because they were subsidizing them.
And with this current increase that you've done, what is the story there?
So you have the commercial, so the small, medium-scale enterprises paying less than, when you compare them to the non-lifeline residential, they are paying less than them.
Okay, so for me and you who are definitely out of the lifeline bracket, you're saying the small, medium-scale businesses will be paying less than us?
Yes, less than. And the intention is to help them grow, help them businesses expand, and recruit people, create employment.
But large-scale industries will definitely pay their fair share.
Yeah, they are also paying, but a little lower than the average.
Okay. The minority's argument is that if you look at the tariff structure critically, the residential consumers fall within 0 to 30 kilowatts an hour bracket and have witnessed a price increase of some, they mentioned 65 cedis, 65.4 pesos, Ghana cedis per kilowatt hour, to some 89 cedis per kilowatt hour, representing an increment of almost 34%. You say that's not it?
So what I'm saying is that that is not the case, because what I think I read that statement, and what it seeks to do is that it seeks to say that the increment, the average increment is 34 instead of 24, 27. I don't know whether that is also. So what I'm saying is that if they are taking just, let's say, residential, and you do an estimation, maybe you may get a little over 30. But if you are looking at the tariff in general,
both residential and non-residential,
then the average is the 27%.
But you made an important point. If you are looking at residential, where the bulk of Ghanaians are, then you're looking possibly at an average that's going over 30%.
A little over 30%, yes.
I mean, but that then will be insensitive, isn't it?
Well, so that is the point. What we did was not to pass on so much cost to the residential. What we did was to reduce the cross-subsidy. So consistently over a time, industry has been subsidizing the residential sector. Now we hear and read in the news that businesses are leaving. Some are relocating to Côte d'Ivoire because there, businesses pay far lower than the residential sector. You go to Uganda, it's the same thing. You go to Namibia, almost everywhere, South Africa, businesses pay less. Why? Because it costs less to serve business than to serve residential customers. That's the first one. The second one is that they are using the power for productive purposes. And when they expand, they recruit the people within the residential, pay them well. So they create jobs. They can expand and contribute to, economic development and all those ones. So almost everywhere, businesses pay less. One, cost, and two, the economics. In Ghana, it has been the reverse since PURC was established 25 years ago. It may have a reason why it started. They wanted to, I don't know the reason behind why that was so. But it comes to a point where we need to, if nothing at all, bring it to maybe let residential match with non-residential. And the reason is that, yes, so that businesses can stay and employ people. Businesses can stay and expand. But
you offer an important clarity. So what you're saying is that if you isolate the tariff increase for residential only, the real impact could be more than 30% for residential.
Yes, it could be.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. But then that means that myself and yourself will be carrying a lot of the burden at a time of, near economic collapse.
Yes. So what I'm saying is that PURC did not apportion the burden, more burden to residential. What PURC just did was to reduce that cross-subsidy, not remove it. The cross-subsidy between the business and the residential, so that businesses can continue to operate. At the end of the day, let's
I get that. So you want to be business friendly?
I don't want to be business friendly. We just want businesses to expand and create jobs.
But even here, you are talking about small scale businesses.
Yeah, that is where we are starting.
Not all businesses.
So it is a gradual
a business like multimedia.
Yes, you fall into that.
You fall into that.
In fact, so even a business like, let's say, multimedia, if you are consuming, let's say, more than 601, actually you may reduce a little decrease in your tariff.
But back to the point then, the minority isn't wrong, is it? Are they? If you're looking at analysis in the context of residential, they are not wrong.
Well, I'm not to mark the minority, but I think that if we are discussing, it should be within a context that, yes, the 27 is right, it's an average, but when I take this group, this is what it represents. When I take maybe the non-residential, this is, if you come within that context, we can discuss it, yes.
Let's talk about September 1.
Yes.
And on the back of what you just said, I would expect 27% plus, right, increase in what I consume the prepaid.
Yeah.
But this explanation that is offered means there's a likelihood that if I calculate it well, I may be possibly paying above 30%.
It may also be not. It may not be the case.
Yeah, but I guess the point I'm stressing is, it is an essential clarity for people, because what tends to happen when tariffs kick in is confusion. Yeah. Because I'm going strictly 27%.
Yes.
And then I see 30%.
Average of 20%.
An average of 27%. Yeah. And I see 30+%. Yeah. I would say the ECG is damn right cheating me. Somebody is extorting me.
Okay. So there are two things we are doing. One, we have a residential class, a group that will pay, let's say, 27% or 28%. they are there. So even within the residential, we have some classes. Some may pay 27 or even lower. Some may pay maybe a little higher. So that is why I'm saying we may not say that A is going to pay 30%. But what we are doing is that...
So the very important clarity is that for whoever listening to us right now from September 1,
yeah,
the 27% you've had is not fixed. It's an average.
Yes.
That you could actually pay more or less.
Yes.
Okay. So the reason why I'm stressing on this,
yeah,
you've been in this country way before you went to PURC. Yes. You know the confusion that happens
yes.
from the effective date.
Yes.
So people are going to go and they say, but they said 27%. So why am I paying 30%?
Yeah. So it can be less.
It could be more.
A little more.
Yes.
Now,
and what does that depend on? I mean, what determines whether you are paying more than 27 or less than 27? What's the factor?
So a number of factors. I mean, the service charge is one. Your level of consumption is one. The things you have. But we will be publishing the tariff decision, hopefully this week. Now, the tariff decision has disaggregated all the customer classes. How much you were paying, how much you're going to pay now, and the corresponding percentage. We're going to do that. We share copies with you. We've also done the reckoner, how the tariff translates into bills. We're going to publish that even on our website, and it's very interactive. So you go there and you know how much you consume. Let's say you put in 300 kilowatt hours. It will just give you how much your bill will be. So we're also going to do that to support. Now from tomorrow, we are meeting the utilities, Ghana Water, ECG and others, to also address the potential issues that may come and map up strategies to implement this.
So that is the anticipated implementation challenges.
Yes.
That's why you're meeting them.
Yeah, that's why we are meeting them to see how we can address them before even 1st September. So we know, in fact, we've experienced some of these challenges in the past, and we want to make sure they don't happen.
I'll come to the question of enforcement monitoring to ensure that we are not being cheated. But finally, on this average, what is the upper limit?
So the upper limit, as if for the residential?
For residential.
For non-residential?
Well, that's where the confusion always is. So what's the upper limit you can expect to pay?
Well, the upper limit should be a little over 30%, but I can get it for you.
Okay.
That is a range between about 25 and a little over 30. I can get it.
Okay. Yeah. So but that will be important because so that at least when I go, I'm armed with that information. I shouldn't be paying, even if I'm going above 27, I shouldn't be paying more than 30x%. Yeah. I mean, I'll follow up for that because then it will help our listeners.
As I also said, the listeners can check on our website for the tariff decision. It will have all these details in there. Yeah.
You talked about, let's talk about monitoring, which is part of your mandate. Yeah. From September 1, when you can bet there's going to be a lot of people where people are now. Even if you take one CD out of my pocket, I'll come for you. Yeah. So how is the PURC planning to monitor implementation to ensure that somebody's not taking advantage of the increases to dupe and cheat consumers?
Okay, so again, 3 things. So the first one is that we have regional offices in the old 10 regions, and some of the regions have oversight responsibility over some of the new ones. We provided pre and post-tariff training for them, provided them with templates to monitor. We have WhatsApp lines for customers we've published. We're also working with almost every assemblyman in Ghana. Now, we are on WhatsApp platforms with them. So when there are issues, they can send them, you can send them through. So that is one. They are also going to monitor, go to some of the centers, the vending centers and all that. So that is one on the billing and others. As I said, we've also done our own reckoner, how the tariff translates into bill. We are not waiting for, let's say, ECG or Ghana Water to bring it. We have in-house developed our own thing to see that if you are consuming this, then that is how much you should pay. So again, we're going to share that with our officers going around, and it will be published to see, going around to check to see whether these things are done. Then finally, on the regulatory audit, the strategic investment I said we've provided for them. Again, we are going to monitor from project conception to ensure that what we approve for them, consumers are paying for, That is what you're using the money for.
Okay. The CPP issued a statement, very interesting statement, and because Nanaya Jantua, who used to be at the PURC, is now the General Secretary, I picked up on that. The suggestion, is, they say in the statement, is that the belief that the Public Regulatory Commission tariff was laden with, quote, political suspicion and interference from government. Is that true?
I don't understand.
That there was government interference in arriving at the increases that was announced, that if you were doing this independently, it should have been more than what you gave the...
Okay, so the CPP is saying what we even approved was lower.
Yeah, that there was government interference in there.
Well, there was no government interference. Let me say that, as I said...
Because they make more important points here, that they believe that is the case because it did not reflect the increases, it did not reflect level of contingent parameters of inflation, CD-dollar ratio, the price of fuel, and the generation mix.
Okay, so in terms of the generation mix, let me take it from there. We take what we use for the calculation from the Electricity Market Oversight Panel. It's a body created by law. They do this hydro allocation. There's also what we call the Power Planning Technical Committee, which is chaired by Energy Commission. They do the energy supply mix. This is what we take and use it for our calculation. We don't take a plant out. We don't substitute any fuel or anything. And that level, I don't know how government can more like change or influence anything there. So that's the first one. The second one on the exchange rate. The exchange rate we used was 7.5. And this is because as at 1st August, when we made the decision, the interbank rate was around 7.6. So, I mean, we looked at a number of factors. And with this exchange rate and inflation, even if it's 7.6 or 7.5 now, but maybe between that time and now it has increased, we use the quarterly adjustment to correct any variances and all. So we have a mechanism to deal with any shortfall that may arise. So again, I don't see how... So we did a very independent work. What we did was to consult, and we consulted widely. We consulted Parliament, we consulted the executives, we consulted everyone, TUC, AGI, and every organization or body or group came out with their suggestions. Some of them...
Including government?
Including government. And as I said, including this the issue on land loans. I mean, I mentioned government. Yes, so government provided the...
So government didn't twist your arms to get...
No, so government did not twist or maybe go and reduce it to this or do this figure. Nobody told us that.
Yeah. And finally, there's a question about what's the guarantee that even the 27% and 22% for water, you're not passing on inefficiencies of these utilities on us? Was that factored in? Yeah,
it was. So PURC has regulatory benchmarks. So let's take GRICO. So GRICO, the transmission, our benchmark for them is a loss of 4.1%. Now, if GRICO is submitting their proposal and they tell you that because we made a loss of 8%, we are not going to put the 8% in the tariff. We are going to just take the 4.1%. We operate what we call an incentive regime. We take the 4.1%. You see that you have excess, some 3.9% loss. That is GRICO's cost you should bear. Now, if we give them 4.1% loss, but they make a loss of 3%, you see that there's some 1.1%. That becomes a profit for them. So when you perform better than our benchmark, you gain. When you perform worse than our benchmark, you lose, and we don't pass it on to the consumer. It is a cost you have to bear.
So the utilities are bearing this cost, and it's not reflected in the changes that...
Yeah, so we just take care of our regulatory benchmark, the benchmarks we give them. Anything apart from all excess of that, it is their responsibility.
And clarity here on this. So in the next 3 years, we should not expect a major tariff adjustment?
So no major tariff adjustment, but there will be quarterly adjustment from the next quarter, every quarter. And depending on the changes in inflation, exchange rate, and others, the tariff can go down It can go up or it can stay the same.
Can I put it to you that where the current economy is right now, with inflation, with depreciation in the forex and everything else, there's no way if you're doing this independently, you should have a maintenance of this. It's only going to go up.
I didn't know you were a prophet. Maybe I'm not. So I don't see what will happen. So when we get there and the variables have changed, if it's up, we pass it on. If it's below that, we pass it on. And if there's no change, we also don't change anything.
Okay. So as far as you're concerned right now, tomorrow's meeting, it's about planning towards implementation.
Yeah.
You have just over a week to get us right. What about sanctions, though? I mean, in the past, we've had PURC always threaten that in implementation, if things don't go well and customers genuinely you investigate and you find you've been imposing sanctions on these utilities. Is that part of the equation?
Yes, I mean, we sanctioned just last week. I mean, you can talk to some of the utilities. 4 of them were sanctioned.
For what?
You can find this out from even the Ministry of Energy, 36,000 each, because they did not even submit their regulatory reports on time. So this time around, if you go against the customer, so we have a law, a regulation that deals with customer-utility relationship. So we have the responsibilities of the utility. If you want to take your light off, how long you have to inform them, all those things. We're going to monitor. We are investing in a system where we can set up PURC and independently monitor what is going on in the system. So if there's no light...
In the grid?
In the grid. So if there's no... And in some transformers, if there's no light here, we can see from there. And if you don't come or if you don't tell the customer, these things will attract.
You say the penalty was 36,000 cedis?
Yes, per at least 4 utilities, but I cannot mention.
Yeah, I mean 36,000 cedis is, you know.
Yeah, for not submitting, so it's like not submitting your assignment in school and they say pay 3,000.
So you're saying that if from September 1, if they don't implement this properly and there are complaints that you investigate and it turns out to be accurate, there'll be more sanctions?
There will be more sanctions.
Okay. Dr. Ishmaelaka, thank you very much for your explanations on what we should expect from September 1. And tomorrow when you meet them, I guess we'll get some clarity on this going forward. Ishmaelaka, my guest, enjoy the rest of the evening.